Welcome to Series 1 of Understanding Gambling Addiction. In this series, we're exploring what gambling addiction really is, how it develops, why it becomes so difficult to stop, and what recovery actually looks like. Because before people can overcome addiction, we first need to understand it. Understanding creates clarity, clarity creates awareness, and awareness is where recovery begins. And in today's episode, what is gambling addiction? Not minds, not stereotype, not judgment, but truth. What gambling addiction really is, and how it affects the brain. And why do so many people find themselves trapped in a cycle they never intended to enter? Let's dive in. What exactly is gambling addiction? Most people think they know the answer. They think gambling addiction means losing money. They think it means placing too many bets. They think it means lacking discipline. But gambling addiction is much deeper than that. And unless we understand what it truly is, we can never fully understand why so many people become trapped by it. My name is ENGMAN Recovery, an addiction mentor and public awareness advocate. And on this channel, we expose the hidden psychology behind gambling addiction and recovery. Today, we are not talking about betting strategies. We are not talking about winning. We are not talking about odds. We are talking about the human mind. Because gambling addiction is not just a gambling problem. It is a psychological problem, an emotional problem, a behavioral problem, and for millions of people, a life-changing problem. So let's begin with the most important question. What exactly is gambling addiction? Gambling addiction is a behavioral disorder. It's a condition where a person becomes unable to control their gambling behavior despite experiencing negative consequences. Let's point out something important there. Unable to control despite negative consequences. This means the person continues even when money is disappearing, debt is increasing, relationships are suffering, stress is growing, promises are broken, life is becoming worse. This is what separates addiction from casual gambling. A casual gambler can walk away. An addicted gambler struggles to walk away, not because they are weak, not because they are stupid, but because the behavior has become psychologically reinforced. The brain has learned to depend on gambling emotionally. At this point, gambling is no longer choice made occasionally. It becomes a pattern, a habit, a coping mechanism, and eventually a dependency. One of the biggest misconceptions about gambling addiction is that it starts with a disaster. It doesn't. It starts with hope, a small bet, a lucky win, a moment of excitement, a feeling of possibility. The beginning often feels positive, and that is why it becomes dangerous, because the brain remembers emotional rewards. Imagine somebody wins early. What happens? The brain records the experience, the excitement, the pleasure, the adrenaline, and the confidence. Now gambling becomes associated with positive emotions, and the mind begins wanting that feeling again and again. Not necessarily the money, the feeling. That is where the cycle begins. To understand gambling addiction, you must understand uncertainty. Human beings are naturally curious. We want to know what happens next. Will I win? Will I lose? Will this ticket hit? Will this game change everything? That uncertainty creates anticipation, and anticipation activates powerful reward system in the brain. The brain becomes excited before the outcome even happens. This is why many gamblers describe gambling as thrilling. The excitement often begins before the result, and because outcomes are unpredictable, the brain remains highly engaged. And that unpredictability is one of the strongest psychological forces behind gambling addiction. There is a moment many addicted gamblers experience. A moment when gambling quietly changes. At first, it was entertainment. Then it became something else. Now, they are gambling when stressed, gambling when lonely, gambling when anxious, gambling when bored, and gambling when frustrated. The behavior begins serving an emotional purpose. It becomes a way to escape feelings, a way to avoid reality, a way to temporarily forget problems. This is where addiction becomes dangerous. Because now, gambling is no longer solving boredom. It is becoming a solution to emotional pain. And emotional dependency is much harder to break. Many gamblers believe one big win will fix everything. One ticket, one prediction, one jackpot, perhaps one miracle. That fantasy is powerful because it promises relief. But here's what many people discover. Even after a big win, they continue gambling. Why? Because the problem was never only financial. The addiction is connected to behavior itself, the anticipation, the excitement, the ritual, and the emotional escape. The money was the only part of the story. When people think about gambling addiction, they often think about money. But money is one consequence. Let's look at others. Stress, anxiety, shame, secrecy, depression, relationship breakdown, loss of trust, sleep problems, reduced concentration, and emotional exhaustion. Many addicted gamblers carry burdens nobody else sees. They smile publicly, but privately they are struggling. This is why gambling addiction is often called a hidden addiction. The damage is not always visible, but it is real. One question confuses so many people. If gambling causes so much pain, why do people keep returning? Because addiction changes behavior. The brain becomes associating gambling with emotional relief. When stress appears, the urge appears. When boredom appears, the urge appears. The behavior becomes automatic, and automatic behaviors are difficult to change without awareness and effort. This is why quitting is not simply a matter of willpower. Recovery often requires understanding triggers, changing routines, and rebuilding healthier ways to cope. Yes, absolutely, recovery is possible. But recovery begins with honesty. Honesty about the damage, honesty about the behavior, and honesty about the emotional attachment. The first step is understanding the problem. The second step is creating distance from it. Distance from betting apps, distance from triggers, distance from environments that encourage relapse. Then comes rebuilding. Rebuilding discipline, rebuilding confidence, rebuilding trust, and rebuilding purpose. Recovery is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming free. If you remember one thing from this video, remember this. Gambling addiction is not simply about money. It is about behavior. It's about emotion. It's about psychology. It is about patterns that become difficult to control. And the more you understand those patterns, the better equipped you become to break them. Because awareness creates clarity, clarity creates action, and action creates change. If gambling was controlling one part of your life, this can be the beginning of a different chapter. One honest decision, one step forward, and one day at a time. Because recovery does not begin with winning. Recovery begins with understanding. Maybe nobody knows how much you are struggling. Maybe you've been carrying this burden silently. Maybe you've been pretending everything is okay while fighting battles nobody sees. But you don't have to carry it alone anymore. Click the link in the description for our one-on-one consultation with us. We'll help you understand the addiction, develop a recovery strategy, and take the first step towards the lasting change. There is hope, there is help, and there is a way forward. The first step is simply asking for it. In our next video, we are going to talk about how gambling addiction begins. Bye.